Hilary lives in Taos, New Mexico. Her writing and teaching focuses on women's spiritual power and the role it can play in our global evolution. Born in Boston, Hilary went to Yale University and received a master's degree in philosophy from CU Boulder. She has extensive experience in Sufism and Tibetan Buddhism. Now please help me in welcoming Hilary Hart.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming. I really appreciate having a little crowd. So we're going to talk about women's spiritual power tonight and how it functions, how it is interconnected with the powers of the earth, and how desperately it's needed in the world to solve many of the issues that are facing our global community. Collectively, I would say women are not living their power. And the reason I say that is because if you look around the world, you will see a decaying set of social systems, a dissolving sense of community, degradation of the earth and the earth systems. And women's power is really very, very essentially about life and sustaining life, creating life, nourishing life. It's about creating community, and not just a community of people, but community of all beings and spiritual energy from the inner worlds, integrating the spiritual energy from the inner world into the outer world effectively and harmoniously. Women's power is about harmony and peace, and not just a gentle quality of harmony, but it includes this sort of violent purification that gets rid of diseased and toxic elements. So why are women not living our power? There are a lot of reasons, I think. I think the biggest one is that we don't know how it works, and that's why I wrote the book. Another reason is because we compromise our power in order to succeed and to thrive, or even just to survive in a patriarchal world that basically doesn't honor, recognize, or value in any way our power and how it functions. I think also our power is invisible. It takes place deep in the heart of life. It's a power of creation and being, and we don't see the powers of creation when they're at work. We just see their expression later. So there's an invisible quality that makes our power hard to recognize. And then lastly, our power is very, very, very much embodied. It's integrated into the physical world much more completely than men's power. And we have a veil around our bodies. That veil is a veil of shame and fear, because we live in a world where the body has been violated, when our bodies have been violated and degraded, and where the bodies of the earth have been violated, and where our children have been violated. And so there's this tremendous guilt and shame and fear that women have to sort of move through in order to really know their power, because it is so integrated into the physical world. And that is a step that many women haven't taken yet. Now, part of the reason we haven't taken that step is because we have been collectively in a major movement that's based in a transcendent point of view. Spiritually, we've been very focused on transcendence. So what that means is our worldly spiritual systems and many of our cultural systems have been projecting outward a sense of the divine, a sense of everything that's valuable and to be revered. And there has been spiritually, the emphasis on the transcendent God, God in heaven. And collectively, there has been a projection of a value system that's informed by ideas of achievement and linear thinking and setting a goal and achieving it and working towards something. And there hasn't been an understanding or a turning into the divine and the sacred and the valuable elements in life, in being, in our own nature, in the nature of life. And so there's just been this major, I don't know if it's 2,000 years, 20,000 years, movement of transcendence that we're coming out of. And so we're coming into more of a sense of the sacredness of life. And some of the environmental movement is informed by this deep, deep understanding that life systems are of intrinsic value, not just objectifiable value or value that we find out of use. And so generally we're awakening to this spiritual dimension that has to do with the feminine and the immanent nature of God or the divine. But if we're really, really serious about the immanent, if we're really interested in the sacred that is present in the earth and in life, then we have to become very serious about the sacredness of the body. That includes the sacredness of a gendered body, because we can't ignore the fact that there are men and women with very different physical systems. And so we at least have to be curious about what that physical ground means spiritually. We can't really just expect to learn about the sacred feminine from a disembodied, abstracted point of view. So that's what Body of Wisdom is about. It's about bringing our attention into the body, about understanding the physical nature of the body as spiritual. I've identified a lot of very basic physical functions of the body and identified their spiritual function. That's sort of the hidden aspect. So I want to talk just a little bit about what inspired me to write the book. I was listening to a Sufi teacher talk about about a substance in women's chakras that's active when we give birth. And he was talking about this substance, about how it is involved in the process, the miracle of a soul coming into physical form in the womb. And that this is an aspect of women's spiritual nature, that we can take a soul, integrate it into physical form, and birth brand new life into the outer world. But what was really interesting to me was that he said that this spiritual substance is not only active in the birth process. It has a role in life beyond birth. It has a spiritual function beyond child rearing. And to me, that was incredibly inspiring. You know, if you're in this business at all, and I've written a few books on the sacred feminine, the divine feminine, there's a way that we can be very imprecise about this realm of the feminine. And here I was listening to somebody talking not just about the sacred feminine, but about how the sacred feminine is lived by a woman. And not just lived by a woman in this miracle of birth, but lived by a woman potentially as a contributor to a greater spiritual evolution, a greater spiritual purpose. And he didn't really say much more about it. But I started becoming really fascinated by this, what I felt inside myself, a real need to ground what I'd come to feel and experience in terms of the sacred feminine in women's spiritual functions. And part of this was because, you know, there are times when we can abstract spiritual functioning out of a grounded reality. And there was a time in the Middle Ages when the cult of Mary grew exponentially. It was a very popular movement. The purity of the Virgin Mary was revered in ways it hadn't been before. At that same time, women were being killed and persecuted as heretics at greater numbers than ever. And so there is this way that we could, and I was feeling in this business of of the divine feminine and talking about the feminine and this spiritual milieu we're all in, that there was a danger we could keep it very abstract. And so when I had heard the Sufi teacher Llewellyn Van Lee talking about the substance in women's chakras, I thought, okay, this is specific. This is embodied. This is about women. And I thought, I'm going to find more. I'm going to discover more about how women's spiritual, esoteric bodies work, how they work with the physical body, how they sustain life and create life, and not just life, but the spiritual essence within life, and how they help spiritually, collectively, help us grow. So after hearing this talk by Llewellyn Van Lee, and he wasn't available for more of an interview, I asked around with people I knew, and I met a Qigong teacher named Dr. Guan Cheng Sun, who teaches Qigong and Tai Chi, and is a Taoist, and he teaches in Seattle. And, you know, the Taoist tradition has always seen and understood the body as a spiritual vehicle.